Indeed. My lunch is there. Switch that view. Yeah. First and foremost, apologies. We're 5 minutes. We're right on time. We're 5 minutes late. One of the weird things that is happening now is I'm outside the classroom webs. I'm more interested in experimenting with what people are doing in the classroom. So I've been like lesson planning, kind of building things with people and stuff. And it's been a interesting experiment. And I got a little wrapped up today, so I apologize, world. Was hustling with a couple teachers and stuff, trying to collaborate and whatnot. But today we do have hopefully a dope show for you. A show that's going to hopefully challenge you to be a little bit more visual. What say you, Webbs?
I'm sure our vast audience was sitting there just waiting for the live light to go on.
I mean, who's to say that wasn't the case?
That's true. That's true.
Indeed. But anyway, we're going to talk about being visual, and it's really at least in Vegas, like the weather's going to change, be a little bit more warmer outside. Kids I think we always have this preoccupation with nature. I think everybody has that kind of concept. Whether you're a homebody like myself, I think you put yourself in that homebody category as well. But being outside and taking a walk, going to wherever, taking pictures, those kind of things, I think bring us peace and bring us joy and make us a little curious about how the world works. And as things get warmed up, at least here and elsewhere in the world, yeah, I mean, I think this is something that needs to be increasingly embedded in how we do school and how school looks. What say you, Webbs?
I would say that my brother, who just saw 48 inches of snow, doesn't see that warm weather coming anytime soon. But I would be inclined to agree with you. I was just talking about, I have this new like hydroponic plant thing, and it's sort of my new little thing that I'm nurturing, even though I don't have to do much. It's pretty much autopilot, but there's something super cool about producing your own like food and then consuming it. Like this morning, I have made an egg and cheese breakfast sandwich, and I used some of the garlic chives from my little hydroponic garden, and I made it on sourdough where like I caught the yeast and made the sourdough bread and stuff. I don't know, there's just something about like being intimately involved with the creation of that I think is super cool.
Yeah, the catching of the yeast thing. When you told me that story, that was very like I did not know that one caught yeast. So that's very interesting as well. Super interesting. Um, but as we always do, we're gonna have a kind of a letter to the editor. And today, again, um, I think we always concentrate on visuals and talk about expressing ourselves and being very open to whether it's video, whether it's putting your thoughts down on paper so we can see them, etc. But as a software developer, as a PhD candidate, as a just a human, why is that? Why is visualizing what we're learning and visualizing what we're curious about? What benefits does that have to how we do our hustle?
Well, like we did a PD years ago about the impacts of visual learning and how, the old adage like we we learn a certain percentage of what we hear, a certain percentage of what we see, and a certain percentage of what we do. And I would say more for my professional life, less for like my PhD life. PhD life is still pretty reliant on the written word as the primary medium of conveying things.
Mm.
That said, I had a cool professor last semester who had us do flip grids, which was super cool. Um, the whole phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in the software development life, we do executive summaries a lot, and executives don't have time to like read through some long dissertation. They want it quick and snappy. The primary means of communication tends to be slide decks,
Mm.
so those should be highly visual, otherwise they're really boring. That said, death by PowerPoint is still a problem, but the best presentations are highly visual ones where you can, and from the perspective of like how we consume media, there is evidence, and I think I wrote about this. I don't know if it was on my website or our website, but how we consume media when you're trying to provide both visual and words all at the same time. It can be overwhelming, and you can experience cognitive overload because of it. So it makes more sense to have like the visual medium be separate from the what the words are, if possible. That said, we have to be considerate of things like accessibility and stuff. But that's also something to keep in mind. Like, so if you have learners who are relying on closed captions in addition to the visuals that you're providing them, they may be more cognitively overloaded than learners who are not relying on the closed captioning.
Oh, and I think also when you're talking about visuals, photography, etc., that's where the alt text I think comes into play very very much in terms of trying to ensure that our students who have the visual impairments would be able to at least access that those images on some level. Um, yeah. So in terms of your gig, you said slide decks and whatnot, but what else? Why else? Perhaps is in terms of how you learn to do your job. Why else are visuals kind of important?
I mean, from the perspective of like mapping code, we rely heavily on diagrams because they're a much better way of viewing architecture. Dog's doing weird things, sorry. They're a much better way of viewing architecture, and it's a lot more concise than trying to have somebody like type out, a 5 paragraph essay about what our Azure architecture looks like. It's a lot easier to collaborate on building out a diagram for something. It also, I think, stimulates a different part of your brain than words do. So it becomes a different means of communication. I had this phenomenal workshop around this time last year, I think it was. And I think I've referenced it like at least once a week, every week since then. And one of the things that we did, by the way, shout out to Ruth Malin and Dana Bredemeyer because they were the ones who did the workshop, ruthmalin.com. But anyway, it was all about architectural design and leadership and designing complex systems. And when we started designing things with little icons and images and graphics and mapping, it really made it so that we had a different conversation and it was a different way of communicating.
Dope, dope, dope. The so I so yeah, I'm a gamer. I play. That's my brain break on a regular basis as I build things and need kind of escape. And right now, um, and I think this is true for all gamers because as soon as I fall into a problem, the first thing I do is Google who has figured this problem out already, so I can kind of. And I hate people who write articles about the problem rather than just screenshots or video or walkthrough. I'm like, all right, cool. I can now follow exactly. I don't have to unpack your vocabulary, or if my player's not articulated in the same direction yours is, and your written directions are all based from a specific point of view. Me watching you do it, I can say, yes, okay, cool, I missed the turn there, or I didn't see the lever that's there at the bottom of the screen, or I can't get past this thing because I didn't look up at the right point, or whatever. It's very difficult for you to visualize solutions to problems when you don't have the full picture, but when someone gives you the picture, it's a lot easier for you. And sometimes just with the picture, you're able to help yourself without having to go and deal with anything else because that's the one piece I forgot. Bada bang, I'm good to go.
I've been working on my sourdough, getting better at making sourdough bread. And one of the things I was really struggling with was the texture of the dough and whether it was too wet or it was too dry. And it really helped to have visuals to compare to go back and rewatch videos over and over again to see exactly how they do certain things, like exactly what is the texture of their dough look like. So that has really helped me kind of use that as a yardstick for figuring out how to solve my problem.
I feel good, good, good. Yeah. I want to spend a lot of time kind of like building stuff and kind of walking through that part because I had a experience recently with a group, and it is very. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to explain it. So if people watch this and they're like, "Oh my God, that's so wrong" or whatever, I'm going to explain it. So I'm giving you a. I'm prefacing my statement.
You're not gonna get us canceled, are you?
We are going to be canceled as soon as I finish. No, I'm joking. This is not a cancelable offense. Um, you cannot teach people to be creative. You can
I don't know
allow
if I agree with that.
you can allow people to be creative because people are already creative. This whole the problem I have with
Oh,
the scenario
it's like
is
yeast.
like
Creativity is like yeast.
yeah. So people, I hate where we're gonna teach. No. The person is already creative. You just need to allow them the space to do it and not control it to such an extent that I can only express myself in this particular way. And if I can't do it in that particular way, then somehow you're saying you're discounting my ability to be creative. I've never met a person who's not creative. Everyone does something. It may not be your something that you find valuable as creative. It might be something that you even perceive as creative. But everyone does something where they take on something, no matter how mundane it is, and they put their little spin on it. And you're like that's yeah, you're owning that piece of work, right? So when people get into the I'm going to teach this person how to be creative, to me that's not a thing. All right, we need to build spaces that allow people to express the creativity they've already possessed rather than I'm going to put you in a room and then I'm going to teach you how to do this thing. I think that's silly. Um, so
It's exactly like yeast. Yeast exists everywhere. You just have to have the jar and the flour and the water, and the yeast will populate. Like, you just have to create the right environment for it.
for our sourdough homies, that's exactly how we get the sourdough people. So, teacher friends, your kids are already creative. Administrator friends, your teachers are creative. Whatever other layer, the people are already doing stuff. It's just giving people a lot the opportunity to do it. That being said, the other thing that I need to rail against very quickly before we set up what we're going to deal with for the rest of the time is teachers working in silos. I am still amazed constantly about we have the tools at this point not to have to work in silos, and again this is going to lead into what we demonstrate tonight. It goes hand in hand with the creativity conversation, Webs, in that if I put 10 people into a room who all have a different skill set, excuse me, different ability to create work, you're going to get a better product than if you sit at home by yourself on a Sunday night with a time crunch trying to build lessons from wherever you're building lessons. I think it also is a scenario in which, and this is kind of where just working with the teachers today kind of just hit me. It was a scenario where you don't know where your blind spots are if you work by yourself, right? You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what pieces you're leaving out. You don't know that it can be done a better, more efficient way. This way, I do it this way, or whatever. I'm assuming, again, let's go back to the sourdough analogy. There are probably other ways to catch the yeast. There are probably other ways to make the sourdough. There are different techniques. I'm assuming that different cultures have different techniques with sourdough bread. I don't think so. There's all these different things that if you combine knowledge, then suddenly you don't have to be the font of all the things. You can just be, I know this thing. Let me connect Voltron, my thing, with yours with Voltron, and now suddenly we've got 2 weeks worth of lessons, and I ain't really got to do squat. The creativity conversation, the collaboration conversations, and the connectedness conversation are all understated parts of why our schooling in our country in particular still doesn't look different than what it did before the pandemic, right? We to me, we're still holding on to vestiges of something that's dead. Go ahead, Webbs.
I'd love to know why. Like, when I was in the classroom, my biggest push and the reason why I worked by myself was I felt like trying to coordinate with other people, there wasn't enough time for it.
Mm.
I think also at the time, I didn't have the tools to do things like meet remotely. I think that's a huge new tool in a teacher's arsenal, because I think now if I were in the classroom, being able to work with my colleagues in my grade level doesn't mean we all have to come in early, or we all have to stay late, or we all have to meet on our prep, or we probably don't have the same prep. So do we give up our lunch? And like, we don't have to do that. We can all go home and say, hey, let's meet at 6 tonight virtually, and we can work on lesson planning together. Or yeah, let's be honest, nobody's getting up early to meet virtually, but we could meet virtually after school, and we could all be in the comfort of our own home, and we could immediately sign off and go to dinner with our families or whatever we're going to do. But like, I think being able to meet virtually is a really powerful way of bridging that gap and being able to actually work with the people who are in your school, on your grade level, on your department team. That's something we didn't have when I was in the classroom.
Well, I also think that we impose limits, right? Um, what if you didn't work with the people at your school? Remote work also means that I can work with somebody who teaches the same grade as me at some school that's halfway across the city or another state or whatever. And again, we can really work with the diversity of these are people who are from different places, different walks of life, or whatever. What if we all kind of combine and do this combo fourth grade class in which we were able to leverage again, expertise from all over the country, the ability for our students to work with one another as well. Because I think that's another thing in terms of students being able. It's great to talk about diversity and equity and stuff like that. But it's a far more powerful thing to say, "Hey, I live in Las Vegas, but I'm working with my partner lives in Anchorage." And we're building this thing because we have to present to this other different group of stakeholders about how X, Y, Z, about how to make a more efficient yeast catching apparatus that will allow us to make sourdough bread empire. All right, bet. All right. So again, I just think it's a lot of we're not ready to let the reins go and let people just do what they do. And I think also there's a fear, right? A fear of, when you let the reins go, you're letting go of control as well. And I don't think that I think school is the most controlling environment I've ever been in. You know, it is. This is what it does. You walk this way. You don't say this. You can't talk in the lunchroom. You got to be on this chapter at this time. It's a very, very my new metaphor for the thing is it's a nursing home, right? It's a nursing home for little kids. I'm gonna your sponge bath is at so and so time. You gonna eat this much at this point. You can only mull about at this point. There's no fun. You're just waiting there, generally just to waste away and to be forgotten, right? And I think that's it's a shame. It's a pitiful shame. Go ahead, Webs.
I was just going to say, there are some nursing homes that have lots of entertainment for older folks. Much like schools, there are some exceptions to the rule. However, most of them are sad.
Uh, so that being the case, let's get happy because this is one of my favorite things to do. When I was teaching middle school, the first 2.5 months of the school year, as soon as we could, we got outside. I saw something else that was brought to attention by a friend who may or may not be talking to me right now about a person railing against cell phone usage in middle school. I am going to tell you as someone who had our students use cell phones every day. Every day, my students use their cell phones in class. Whether it was, yo, take your phone, let's go outside, take a picture, and I'll write me a 60-second story about that picture. Just make some stuff up. Or let's just take a walk through the campus very quickly. Or what? Take your phone out. Now, be respectful. Model the fact that we don't take pictures if people don't want their pictures taken. And if somebody asks you, hey, I'm not. That's not my thing. You respect that situation. But there is a peace. There is a beauty. There's an artistry to taking photographs that every person should have the ability to do, and then to be able to edit and display those photos for other people. I think is a part of presentation, a part of articulation that is undersold and understated in our in classrooms, and I think in our society as well.
I'm
Big
chuckling
facts.
at John's
Big facts,
comment.
Carippo. Big facts, Carippo. Big facts.
Quit making boogeymen out of everything. It's weird. It's so true.
Big
Oh my
facts.
gosh. There's been a big conversation about there's a local school that was getting yonder pouches or whatever. And there's a big back and forth about, should they have them? Should they not have them? Should middle schoolers use phones, et cetera, et cetera. And my thing is, yonder pouches are really expensive. And it took me about 5 minutes of Googling to find out I could buy a $20 magnet on Amazon to take them apart whenever I wanted. And I'm pretty sure middle schoolers are equally as savvy. So I don't know why you would waste your money.
We are xenophobic individuals. We are also individuals who are like, we tell lies, right? We're talking about college career readiness. When are you not going to have a cell phone?
You know how many people take notes by taking pictures of the whatever's on the screen? Like,
But
it's a common tool. I don't
so instead
understand
of
why.
demonstrating to people how to use the cell phone constructively, it's like, no, we don't want that.
Okay. Or reflecting on why is the cell phone more interesting than whatever it is you're teaching.
This is also true. So, but I mean, those are hard truths, and I don't think those are truths that we're ready to deal with. And the fact that, again, generally, my experience, and you can tell me this is not true in your experience, Webbs or Carippo, the kids know how to use their phones far more dynamically than the Chromebook that you've given them. They know shortcuts, they know the apps they're going to do the things and whatnot. It was really kind of, I always cherished learning about the new apps, or apps I was unfamiliar with, rather, when we were like, hey, this is what we need to do. I'm going to show you some ways that I know how to do it. Who knows? Well, you can use this app, Mrs. Line, you can do that. And you're like, all right, cool. Let me put that on that was really slick. Let me put that on my phone right now because I'm going to use that myself to publish, right? So I think also respecting students as people who are knowledge makers as well. My wife sends me texts when I'm upstairs, like, "Hey, look, can you get so and so or whatever?" Right? Or she calls me, and like the phone is not a. I think people are still considering it like this auxiliary piece of technology rather than the core piece of technology that it is, and I think it is. People are afraid of the cell phone because it gives the learner freedom. I can now opt out of what you're talking about, and that I want to eliminate all opt outs for you because of the fact that again, you're telling me that you're not interested in my whatever I'm dealing with, and that could be hurtful.
We can't have competition.
But going back to what you said previous, though, Webbs, every teacher I've ever met has been in PD when they've been on their phones or talking to their friend and not paying attention. Every teacher that I've ever met. So we
staff
all
meetings.
But wait, staff meetings. I'd be sleeping. I've slept through staff meetings. I've just not shown up to staff meetings. Oh, it's all kind of stuff that I'm just like, yeah, this is dumb, and I'm gonna utilize my own freedom and opt out of the situation. So, to deny students that right, and I always go back to Schlechte. If I'm authentically engaged, then I'm doing what you want me to do because I'm genuinely interested in what you're talking about. You don't have to go in, hit me with whips and chains. I'm going to do this because it's interesting. And if Schlechte says this over and over again in his books, you are not going to have people authentically engaged all the time. It's impossible. But when they're not authentically engaged, hit the pause button. What's wrong? Like, what about this doesn't work for you? You have to treat your user like someone who's a user rather than I have control over you and I can coerce you to do these things that you don't want to do. Suddenly the kid tells me, I don't like X, Y, and Z. This is too long. Well, what? Cool. Let me go and make this more efficient. You as the designer know what you need the user to be able to do because you're the professional, you know your standards and stuff like that. Every teacher, I'm going to say this without qualification. Every teacher I've ever met has been somebody who has the ability to problem solve. Even the ones that I don't think are particularly the most pedagogically solid people, we have the ability to problem solve because you problem solve in your life outside of school all the time. So there's the ability to go ahead and add those things in there. So I really think that it's Big facts, Carippo. And we need to go ahead and have a situation in which I now refer to teachers as instructional facilitators. You are not someone who should be sitting in front of the classroom just running your mouth for 45. Nobody wants to hear that crap. And you don't get paid that much to do that. My job is to drink my coffee and watch you do work. That's what I'm supposed to facilitate learning. I'm not supposed to be sitting there learning for you. At least that's how, by my third or fourth year in school, Webs, that was my hustle. I do not get paid enough to be learning for you. You need to do the work, fam. Which, to kind of go back to what we're talking about today, I have never met a person in 17 years of teaching in which kids did not, a person that did not like to take photography. Yeah, big facts.
Because
big
it's low barrier to entry. Like anybody can take a picture, and then being able to learn how to take better pictures, it's really subjective because it's art. So there is no wrong answer. It makes it a lot more approachable when there's suddenly no wrong answer.
Bada bing.
Slinging packets.
Yeah.
Hey, some people do PDFs now.
Yeah, slinging PDFs or slinging TPT, the toilet paper crew. Yeah, I mean, photography, whether you believe you're a good photographer or not, everybody can do it. And shout out to Apple. They brought Bill Frakes in for when I was 80 that first year. Shut up, sheets. They brought Bill Frakes in. Bill Frakes, like wonderful, internationally known photographer. And dude, somebody asked him a question. It was like, Bill, how do you get really good at photography? Well, you take a lot of pictures. It's not difficult of a thing. You take a bunch of pictures, eventually you stumble upon one that you like. And so we're gonna kind of play with that. We're gonna kind of play with that idea in terms of, man, there are tons of really dope ways you can get kids excited about photography. Really good ways that you can get kids to express themselves. Quick story, Webs. I had a student who was, I still think the kid, he's supposedly special ed, severely learning disabled. Got in my class, I had no idea the kid was severely learning disabled. This is my last year of teaching at in middle school. Go outside taking pictures of kids and making, amazing stuff. Playing around with stuff, editing things, stuff was amazing. His special ed, the special ed facilitator comes and emails me, do you know about, can you tell me about how XYZ person comports himself in class? I'm like, so-and-so is special ed? Yeah. Okay. I would have never guessed it. He's able to articulate, he takes the pictures, he's able to articulate what he wants to do, whatever. So I have no problems with the kid, no behavior issues or anything. Again, I ain't no super teacher. I just, my user likes visual art. We do visual art, right? So anyway, when I left, that Friday I left, I had two SPED meetings, virtual SPED meetings. I had one for a young lady who, it is wonderful to see kids collaborate. She's the most collaborative student I have ever met in my life. She would go, another young lady who was in class, they had the same schedule. And the other young lady was illiterate, functionally illiterate. And she said, Mr. Lang, just put me next to her and I'll make sure she gets her work done. And they were always paired together, whatever, rocked and rolled. Kid was amazing. Amazing kid. But the other gentleman had his meeting, and mom was like, yeah, he likes your class. He does this, whatever. And he said, you just let him do what he likes to do. I'm like, that's not what I do. I still find there's still standards that we're following. It's good that he perceives that he can do what he wants to do, because that's the point, right? And so I think that overall, there's not a kid that doesn't like to make videos. There's not a kid that doesn't like to do photography. There's not a kid that doesn't like to talk to other people that have the same niches that they're interested in. These are all like human things, right? And so for us to pretend that these are not human things, we'll be going to the artificial world that is school, I think is also problematic. In your job, Webs, if I had not, say I'm uncomfortable with a certain style of work or a certain idea or concept or whatever, would you have a 30-minute conversation with me, or would you, not to say 30-minute conversation, would you have a 30-minute conversation with me without the ability to share your screen, to walk me through certain processes to make sure that I really understood how to go from XYZ place to XYZ? Or would you just have this phone conversation? Bob, I'm going to explain to you on the phone how to do this complex thing that you don't know how to do.
God, no. What? That's just a waste of perfectly good resources. Like, our objective is not to force people to like do things one specific way, but to know the best way to do the thing. For example, like working remotely, one of the things we have to often make the decision about is, does it make sense to continue a conversation over text, or should we just jump on a call real quick? Where we have the ability to whiteboard and share screens and demonstrate things and stuff like that. So I think it's actually a more common skill to be able to determine what's the best mode to convey a certain idea, which I guess if you're forcing people into, you must communicate X way, they will never learn that because they don't have to weigh the pros and cons of like jumping on a call versus continuing to express things over like Slack or whatever.
Yeah, allowing people to be creative rather than telling someone be creative. And like, I just, again, witness a teacher, they're not being creative. Okay. Again, I've never experienced that in the classroom where you're like, hey, kids don't come up with ideas that are natural ideas. I mean, I'm still.
At what point do we decide school has to be boring? I feel like somewhere along the line we decided that if school is fun, we're doing it wrong.
I mean, I think people go back into their own experiences with school and say, this is how it was for me, hence it will be like this for you. And I think that's unfortunately what it is. I mean, that is
it's the old, listen, my parents spanked me and I turned out fine. Did you though?
I walked the 55 million miles to school.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah, all that bull crap. So I mean, again, I think there's a necessity again for people to be outside their own classrooms. I think Twitter helps us do that. I think that Twitter helps us do that to an extent. Facebook to an extent. I think there's still both of those places are kind of weird environments for like they're an interesting place to glean stuff. But I think it's a lot easier for us to combine forces than it was. All right, that being the case, how the devil do we do? I'm gonna say this. Canvas is uniquely positioned to do what we're talking about doing because I don't need really a third party to be involved with the process very much. If you look at Google Classroom is still a rather vanilla interface. A lot of the decisions are already made for you and whatnot. And I think the issue with Canvas is that people get intimidated by the scope of what Canvas allows you to do or not do. Because it's not set up for you generally. You have to build things or whatever. You've got to have a little bit UX UI experience, some human-centered design thoughts, just basic design skills in order to do things. But
in the Apple ecoverse, I consider it a like Final Cut versus iMovie. I feel like Google Classroom is like iMovie. You can kind of drag and drop things, but you reach limitations fairly quickly if you're using it often. And then you get into Final Cut, and it's kind of a big leap, but you have so many more options. Well,
it's also a situation where people have built efficient plugins and workarounds in Final Cut Pro for you to be able to access it at a level that it doesn't make it iMovie at all, but it still makes it a lot easier to deal with. And if you're someone who's real with yourself that says, I don't know how to do this thing, the YouTubes is your friend, my friend. There's billions of videos that people have walked you through. I have no Final Cut Pro certification. I played with the tool until it did what I wanted to do. And then when I got to places where I couldn't do it anymore, I took classes or I YouTubed it. I think that is another skill set that, that needs to be role modeled in schools, because I think I had students even at the end of my tenure. Mr. Like, you know everything. No, I don't. And you shouldn't think that your teacher knows everything. That's a problem. Your teacher don't know squat. In the in the history of the world, your teacher knows very, very little inside of their brain about how things operate. And students your teacher should be an empowering tool to students to say, you can express yourself in a number of different ways positively in the world in order to make this a better place. I'm going to help you by being your partner on the journey rather than I'm going to tell you what to do, because that's some bullcrap. But anyway, I digress. Now, in terms of our hustle here, again, we don't have to make this super hard. And I think again to your case, Webbs, with the Google Classroom being iMovie, we can make Canvas iMovie too. Get away from the comparing your Canvas modules to edu teacher, celebrity person on Twitter, and they saying they're doing all these things. All right, just because something is complex does not make it better. In my opinion, again, your Canvas is split into two different workflows. If I'm a student that needs to work on their own, that's what the modules are for. This is my philosophy. This is not the official instructor philosophy. This is Mike Lang's philosophy. I'm speaking as a one half of the Intelligent Hoodlums at this point. This workflow here is asynchronous work. Kids go to work by themselves with a group. I'm not being pushed. I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm going to work my way through my modules the way that I would like. The discussions.
Are you going to do your little memorization thingy?
What do you mean?
You used it. I don't know if we were on a show or if we were just talking. Modules are for me.
Yes. So modules for me, and then discussions for, what did I say? Dialogue.
Yeah.
So, to me, you can build that workflow. So again, in 2022, we do not need kids rushing through work just because that's what we've always done, because we have the tools not to have them rush through work. Like literally, I can take my time. And the age-old question, the question I've asked recently to a group of teachers, if a brand new student were to be placed in your class today, how would that kid know where they need to start in your course? Or would they be forced to start wherever you are because there are no protocols that have all the other things already recorded, or in a kind of a stratagem for that kid to be successful in your class? You would just be like, you're out of luck, Chuck. We're at 9-3. Guess where you are? That's, to me, is unfair. And that's inequitable, given, again, the ability for us not to have to do that. But it is what it is. Discussions are the places where you're going to do, I've got that mini lesson I need to do. Kids are having issues. I'm looking at people's work, and this is a constant issue there. I need to break kids into little groups, whatever. This is where you do that. It's also a place for kids to spotlight their work, to ask for feedback on work. That is not, I hate teacher-only feedback, Webbs. If the only person that's conversing about your work with you is the teacher, we have one person's perspective on your work, which is problematic. Webbs.
I would say that the same thing applies to teachers. Like if your supervisor is the only person who's giving you feedback on your work, that's just one perspective. That doesn't tell you what your colleagues think. It doesn't tell you what your students think. It doesn't tell you the broader view of what the quality of your work is. That was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned leaving education was you can ask for feedback from anyone. I, for some reason, had it stuck in my head that my supervisor was the only person allowed to give me feedback. And once I had my eyes open to like, no, you can literally go to anyone and say, hey, what do you think of this lesson? And especially virtually and remote and Canvas and LMSs make it so much easier to be able to do that, because you can just send someone a link and say, hey, go through my course. What do you think of it?
Big facts. Big facts. All right. So again, for those who are like unfamiliar with how we roll, again, the discussions to me are the backbone of any Canvas course, because it allows your users to converse with one another, allows you to converse with your users organically. It doesn't become I'm going to dump this work in a space. You will do the work in this vacuum and no one will ever speak to you ever again in life. It also gives you the ability, because it is a discussion, if a student is not there present at the time. They come late to class. They go to Nova Scotia for 3 weeks and then come back or whatever. They can always go back through discussions and see this is what kids were talking about this particular artifact that was presented or this idea or whatever. And I can still add my voice to that discussion. I mean, as long as I don't close the discussion for comments, those things are alive for as long as I would like them to be alive. All right. So in terms of the photo galleries hustle, this is no prep work. This is just me clicking the discussion. I wanted to make sure there wasn't, oh, I had all this wonderful stuff thrown in here. This is literally when this school year, first 2 or 3 weeks of the school, I would literally 15, 20 minutes before class, build these things up really quickly. So let's say we're going to talk about, a photo walk. Let's say a community photo walk. And if you have not done this activity where kids like, just walk through your neighborhood, take some pictures of things you think are interesting. The can on the corner, the cat that doesn't shut up, the dog that barks at you, what it looks like on the school bus, to drive down your route to the school bus or whatever. Some of the richest, most interesting images that you will ever find are kids just being observant of their environment and being able to tell the story of how they roll. Man, it's just in there. Countless examples of, if you just look for it's Black History Month, any of the photos of the civil rights movement, those things tell, without words, they tell these very powerful stories. And I think the kids walking through the neighborhood taking pictures does the exact same thing. But in terms of directions and stuff, throw whatever directions you want in here. But here is the really cool part about Canvas. I don't need to go and search for a bunch of pictures in order to do photography at all if I don't want to. I go to my images there, right? Got an image on my computer, great. If I don't, Unsplash is now built into Canvas. So I can just say, I want, that's a little confusing. Great, I got pictures of Martin Luther King. I don't need to Google them. I don't need to go upload them from nowhere. They're the pictures. All right, cool. I'm gonna click that one. Great. I'm also gonna go here. It gives me the other cool thing is it gives me alt text already. All right, great. And I'm gonna add. All right, great. Wonderful. I could change the dimensions if I wanted to or whatever. Photography was an important part of displaying the atrocities that Black Americans suffered during the civil rights protest. For this activity,
I think one of the interesting things too about having your kids take photos is you can see things literally from their perspective. Like if they're taking pictures of their community, it tells you something about what's going on in their head and what is important to them, what they choose to take a photo of or what captures their attention. And it can be a really deep insight into them as a person.
Big facts. And also, where are young people on social media? They're not on Facebook.
TikTok and Instagram.
Why are they on TikTok and Instagram?
Because those are highly visual mediums.
Bada bang. Your user is in place where they want to watch and consume things that are visual. So that being the case, you showing them how to create college and career readiness. You want to make TikTokers make money, Instagram photographers make money. How do we go and get those kids into those things? In addition to the fact that being able to take a good photo and understanding basically the rule of thirds, that's a skill that if I wanted to work in any profession, being able to take my own photographs that are visually pleasing, set up websites to, make sure my portfolio online was better, whatever. Those are skills that are highly marketable regardless of whatever you decide to go into. So
Even just creating presentations and documents that are appealing to your audience. Like there is no job where you don't have to communicate.
big facts.
Every job has, you have to communicate ideas somehow, whether it's asking for a raise or making the case for why you need more equipment or trying to communicate something to an internal or external audience. Like there's always some element of communication, and being able to create something that is visually pleasing is going to help capture your audience's attention. And if they can give it, if they give it you their attention, they're more likely to listen to your message. If they aren't going to give it their attention, or if you're doing something that's distracting from your message, you're going to alienate your audience and not get your point across.
Absolutely. So, in terms of the options, always allow the threaded replies. So, as kids upload their photos, those things are not distracting from the other conversations and whatnot. The kid is seeing their comments on their particular photograph. All right. I usually say users must post before seeing replies. I don't want free riders here. Everyone's creative. I want you to be able to put your own information here, and then we can talk about what you need to deal with. I enable the podcast feed so I know, hey, this somebody uploaded it and I want to check their photo out. I also want to include that the replies as that thread pops up. I'm aware of what's going on. Allow liking. Again, I have a love-hate relationship with allow liking. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Add to student to do. Now, the power of the adding to student to do is not because I want it to be graded, because it's not graded. I don't care. This is not a graded situation. I'm going for authentic engagement here, not you're going to get an A if you post a thing on there, because I think that motivation is different. This is just going to say, hey, kid, it's something that you have to do. And when are you going to have to do it? You're going to have to do it by Friday. I'm going to give you a week to do, that would be last Friday. I'm gonna give it to this Friday to get that accomplished. You got a whole week to upload your stuff in there so everybody can see your stuff. Group discussion, you can utilize it if you would like. I'm not gonna make this a group discussion. I'm also not gonna fill in the available until. That way it'll just be open. Kid decides to add what they need to add. They can do what they need to do. So I hit that save button. Great, fine, dandy, whatever. All right, now. In terms of you as teacher person, why this is kind of a dynamic thing, the photo walks, the one that I did, we finished before I left the classroom, was a kid, or the ask was over the week you take 5 images. They could be raw images that you didn't touch at all. They could be images that you edited. They could be images that you had. We had kids that did kind of fantasy art where they took their road home and kind of made it this like space journey or this medieval thing. They, really changed the texture and the understanding of the photo and context. Really, really cool stuff. I'm one of the people that's, again, I started the conversation off webs with you can't teach people to be creative. You can allow them to be so. By giving them constraints, yes, creative constraints, I'm totally down with that. But telling them they can't do certain things, that's not art to me. Art is railing against what you told me not to do and doing it anyway. That's what art is to me, in my opinion. That's why people like rap music and punk rock music and stuff, because these were the genres that were created to rail against a system that was keeping them from raising their voices in a lot of ways. What say you, Webs?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like why restrict what they're allowed to use? Why restrict how they're allowed to use it? If you're looking at like what's the core thing that you want them to take away from it, focus on that, not how they deliver it to you.
Big facts. Now, couple things very quickly. Canva's doing big things in the world. Only kind of interesting thing with Canva is that you have to like upload your kids and whatnot in order to use the school function there. But Canva is going to give you the ability to do a lot of the editing and stuff that you need. Adobe, this is my go-to hustle, just because they were the industry standard. They probably still are the industry standard, but Canva is nipping on their heels a little bit. If you're a Clark County School District teacher, all your kids have access to this. Every last one of them. Pixlr, another free, and I big up Pixlr all the time because I think this is my favorite online photo editor just because it's super easy to use. And again, I always let me sign myself in real quick. I always no, do that. I always uh utilize this. I've used this with kinders, and I can't say that the kinders were as proficient as with the as the middle school students were, but they did a lot of really dope
I
stuff.
think that's fair.
That's just something that happened. All right, so that's some school stuff. These are all, and the other thing, because I'm writing a blog post for my W-2 job for this right now. Teacher person, you can show kids the value of creativity by also doing the activities that you want them to do. I think the buy-in factor there where you have, this is Mr. Lang's example. Oh, that's cool. Or man, how'd you do that piece? Or whatever. It creates the situation where I am not stating that creativity is important. I am demonstrating that creativity is important. And this is how I use it in my life. Not as a, it's really cool if you do, remake a book. Mr. Lang, where's your book? Oh, I ain't had time to do all that. Well, I mean, then is it that value? If I didn't feel it was valuable enough to do it, why was this kid gonna ball out to go get it done? What say you, Webbs?
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Also, it gives you an opportunity to expand your skill set in a relatively low risk way because you get to mess around with it and kind of figure out what are some of the issues that your kids might have working through the same project.
And being able to authentically speak to that and say, I made this thing. Some of the problems I had with it was this didn't work, or it took me a long time to do this piece, or whatever. And you're able to guide the learner a lot more authentically to, you don't want to wait to the last minute to do this piece because it took me da 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 to do. Or you might want to think of another tool to utilize other than this thing. And it also has a situation where as you're going through it, a kid might say, Miss Weber, you should have used XYZ tool. Have you ever seen this tool? No, I ain't never seen that before. Oh, it would have cut 25 minutes off of that, what you just did. Oh, that's super dope. This TikToker I follow does XYZ, and that would be very cool. That it also opens that conversation up because you've authentically gone through a process, and then the kid can go and speak to that as well. All right, so I'm just going to pull this one up. So this is like a weird picture of the outside of my classroom, like directly outside the doors. And there was a leaf that was sitting there by itself, and I thought it was interesting. But I wanted the background to kind of look like a different planet, and so we really played with textures and stuff. So it kind of I wanted it to look like Mars. And the kid, when I had put a red filter on it, said it was like you couldn't really read it very well. But yeah, this is just playing around. This is one picture that I edited. We're also not grading. No, before I say that, Webbs, what is your opinion on grading art?
I think that you might be able to say certain elements are there, but I don't think you can decide on quality. Like you can't say like art is subjective. So giving it a grade based on whether you like it or not or is it good or not is a different thing than oh, I'm looking for something that has warm colors. Okay, you can observe that and you can say yes it's there, no it's not. Or you have combined two images together. That's a skill. You can say yes you did that thing or no you did not. But I don't think you can like say objectively this is good or bad and grade that aspect of it.
All right. The other thing is stuff like this. All right. And so this is something I did at the beginning of the pandemic in 2019 the pandemic started. So
2020.
2020. Time, days, all this stuff is kind of
Yeah, time's messed up.
yeah, it's just like, dude, we need to like have a conference of humans and like decide this is gonna be like year zero again, and we can just start over. But it is what it is. This is the other kind of dope thing, and I wish I had some examples of some of my old students' work that was lost in the sauce, but this is when I was still teaching elementary school, and it was again kind of that was the beginning shots of that remote learning. We were just like thrown into, oh my god, the system was not designed for this type of thing. And so sat down with a couple teachers, and they were like, look, we need something like going to be big, that's going to allow kids to kind of express their creativity. It's going to be low coercion and more authentically engaging. So I was like, all right, cool. Let's just say we had a zoo at school. This was like a K2, K3 type thing. And built everything out. There's a little video of me in my room there or whatever, talking about I need your help or whatever. They had to do a little, research and stuff and whatnot. All right, so they had, get started or whatever. We had a little the Nearpod embedded in there, all kind of wonderful stuff. This is also how I showed students if they didn't have a photo essay template. We had some kids that had iPads and iPhones, so I showed them the photo essay template inside of Keynote, which is really slick and set up for you or whatever. But if you were working on a Chromebook and wanted to edit your photos in a Chromebook and stuff, Google Slides is a natural lookbook photo essay hustle just for this main reason. This is there, and he went and edited my stuff. Anyway, it's hilarious. It's that publish the web feature that's there, and having kids, all your kids in Clark County at least, have their Google instances. That publish the web feature is going to give you the ability to have a situation where we can do the photo gallery type scenario here. So I'm gonna hit that publish the web, and I'll unpublish it later on. I'm gonna go to the embed function there, webs, and let's keep it medium. I'm gonna say every minute it'll auto advance. That'll give the user a lot more control over how quickly the pages turn or whatever. Yeah, whatever. I'm gonna copy this. Command C. All right, super dope. Now, inside the reply deal there, all your students are going to have the magic cloud. Now, if I didn't want them to embed this or whatever, I can go right to my images and do the exact same thing. And they can upload their images, just drag it from their computer and upload it there. They can upload it from Unsplash. You can add a URL. The thing to teach them, and this is kind of something I've been just hanging with webs and speaking to Valerie and just kind of being in the accessibility world a lot more than I was previously. That alt text is super important. So having your students, if they're going to upload a photograph, walking them through why alt text is important and giving them the skills to write succinct descriptions of this is not a decorative image because it's an image that is speaking directly to a prompt. So I want someone who is visually impaired to understand this is the corner of Decatur and whatever street, a can is there or something like that, or my whatever the devil it is. But having that descriptive image part is there is very important.
It's also a great opportunity to meaningfully practice writing and typing. So
Oh, big
people are
facts.
always like, one of the questions we get all the time is, what typing program do you recommend? None. I recommend authentic work where they have to write things using a keyboard or dictation or something. So
Big
where they
facts.
have to think about what words do I want to use and how do I get those words into a description?
Big facts. That is great. So I'm gonna throw that embed code in there, hit that submit button, and bada bang, my assignment is there. Also, great strategy for teacher people. If, as I have said over and over again, and I don't know if you agree with this, Webs, it's just me, riffing. Use your technology. Don't let your technology use you. All right. You should be going to Canvas, Google Slide, whatever the W you use with a purpose, and I'm gonna bend it to my will, not the other way around. I don't need to know how to do all of the things in Canvas. I just need to know how to get what I want to get accomplished. So if you're really good with Google stuff, your course should be page Google Doc embed in Google Slides embedded. What are kind of really creative and outside the box ways I can use Google Slides to mask the issue with me not being a Canvas master, rather than the other way around. I'm trying to learn this program that's going to take me years to understand the ebbs and flow of, and then I'm gonna throw away all the things that I've already learned in the past. What say you, Webs?
Yes. The one caveat to that would be be sure you're using the thing in a way that makes sense. So, like, one of the things that I found a bit frustrating this year or this semester is one of my classes is using quizzes instead of something else. And it's really frustrating that, like, I can't go back and redo it, or I can't look at what I submitted. They're using quizzes as assignment submissions. That's what it is. So,
Interesting.
like, yeah, like, it's a quiz, and then when I go into the quiz, I upload my document, but that means I can't go back and look at what I submitted, which makes it really awkward. So, like, I would say that one of the things to keep in mind is, like, make sure you understand what the student experience is when you're doing it, because I think there's a lot of neat things you can do. Totally agree with, like, if you're a Google aficionado, go use Google into the ground and see how it can augment the most basic things you're doing in Canvas. But look at it from the user's perspective. Like, you have that student view ability. Look at what it looks like from your student perspective and really put yourself in their shoes, because sometimes things can be really frustrating, or better yet, give it to someone else and
Mhm.
have them go through it and just watch them go through it, because you might be filling in gaps where you're like, oh, I know that this is what I meant by this, so it makes sense to me. But if someone else who's brand new to it is looking at it, they might go, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go next. And that's really going to give you the best feedback for if your course is easy to follow.
Well, I think that it goes back to the core of your student as user. I need to get feedback from my user. Does this work? Does it not work? Etc. And it's not, at least what I've experienced over the last, like, now speaking to teachers from an outside the classroom perspective, is really assuring people that it is not an indictment on your course or yourself. It is simply saying, I'm trying to make this product worth your while. I want you to have rave reviews about the product, but the only way I can do that is if I talk to you and you tell me this is wrong. You could do this better or whatever, and don't catch feelings. And I think that's the. I mean, everyone has an ego, and everyone wants to have a situation in which I know what I'm doing. I think that teachers are so scrutinized anyway. Having a 9-year-old say, "Hey, I really didn't understand that." It's very easy for for us to push back and say, "Because you're 9 and I know what I'm doing." You know what I'm saying? Not a situation where I value your feedback as a user, and you're saying this. Does anyone else have that experience where you couldn't do X, Y, and Z? Yes. Okay. Cool. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna fix it, and we'll do this again a different way tomorrow. All right, bet. And then the problem is solved. I mean, the number of times Webbs as a instructor, I had to swallow my pride and say, this kid is 6 and they're telling me this is difficult, and I stop and say how many other people, and like 80% of the class raised their hand, like, we don't get that. And you just got to swallow your pride and say, all right, cool, so give me a second, I'm gonna think, all right, cool, let's do it this way instead.
Briefly standing on my soapbox for a minute, I don't think teachers should have to be this kind of instructional designer. I think designing lessons for an LMS is a completely different and separate job from being a teacher. And it should be, it requires knowledge of HTML and CSS and web design. And honestly, I think it should be a completely separate job. Teachers should be able to pair with a designer, a virtual learning designer, or whatever job we want to call that, instructional designer, um, or instructional design partner. I think that's actually what our website says. A teacher should be able to pair with an instructional design partner and help them build the content that they want for their LMS, but it shouldn't be this whole set. It's just a whole set of skills. It's a whole job all by itself. And I don't think that's a thing that people who get into teaching should have to do. They should be given someone who works with them to work together to design high quality online instruction.
I would say that's a word there, Webbs. I don't think that people that unfortunately, I don't think we have the capacity to imagine what that looks like, or the will to do that, unfortunately, because you would have thought that school districts, the Secretary of Education, etc., would have, like, that would have been something that would have hit them in the head, like, This is a different thing right now. This is not the same thing it was. We have different
No, no, no.
possibilities.
We have to go back to normal. We have to go back to normal, but normal. We have to go back to normal.
Yeah, and so that's the disappointing part of it. And so if you're not a teacher who has the skills requisite to do what you're saying, do it, or the time requisite, or not having kids, or not having a wife, or a husband, or a partner, or whatever. Like if you've got an actual life outside of teaching, you pretty hemmed up. And I've not been very hopeful. Just getting soapbox. I'm very hopeful in terms of the leaders of the educational enterprises in our country coming to because they don't have the talent or the imagination or the level. They're not being allowed to be creative enough to say another system is imaginable. It's not. We're not even talking about like cars flying. We're talking about like some very simple ways that we can shift so that people would be able to go to sleep at a proper time, that you would have people a lot happier when they went to work. Parents having the understanding, the ability to say, if my kid got sick for 3 weeks, they're not going to be so far behind in school that it's just ridiculous. Or if the teacher got sick, or went on maternity leave, we're not having kids with large opportunities to not authentically be able to engage their teacher in that way. We have the technology requisite to do it. It's just essentially, like you said before, creating a separate position or positions in which those consultants come into schools and say, all right, look, let's build this thing. Or you build it at a district level and say, here's this stuff. Now, if you want to go and start fiddling with it and add your own paprika and chili paste and get your own yeast or whatever to it, great. But the basis, the basis of your course is dynamic. It will teach your kids the college career ready skills that we're promising. If you want to add the funk to it, add the funk to it. So here's what it is. The photography hustle and the utilizing the discussions. I'm beating discussions into the ground because I think one of the things I hate to hear all the time, oh, you can't talk on the internet. No, they gotta be right next to each other to talk. No, you can talk. People could have been conversing with smoke signals and hand claps and songs and all kind of crap. You ain't gotta be in the same room to have no conversation with youngins. Now, am I discounting that? Absolutely not. It is definitely, I'm not saying don't be in the same room with people. That's not what I'm saying at all. But do not limit conversation, discussion, and dialogue to I have to physically be in the same room with you, because for some reason that's a more valuable experience than saying, if I live in a place that's not particularly economically diverse or culturally diverse or religiously diverse, the only people I'm gonna see is the people that look just like me. How does that damage you as a human going forward? That makes you perceive that certain things are true that might be the polar opposite of those things. Because we have technology, we can go and reach out to individuals that are different from us and have conversations that are authentic conversations, right? Rather than have a situation where, again, the only people I can talk to are the people in the room. Which I heard that crap this week or last week, Webs, like 3 or 4 times with people. And I don't say anything anymore. This is the other cool thing. This is why I will always wear a mask in public. They can't see your face. And that's the wonderful thing about it. You can't see me smirking or, whatever. Just put my mask on. I'm just, show you right. Yep, show you right. Indeed. Due to the fact that my birthday is in 2 weeks, we're going to have back-to-back shows. So next week we'll have another show to kind of play around with. If you have not visited Dope, if you've got loved ones in your life, teachers who are struggling with Canvas, what we have done, I'm gonna do a lot better at uploading some more goodness up there, is the Dope website. So designing optimal pedagogical experiences, there's our stuff there. Our very first page is Canvas and discussions. There's some stuff you can download and whatnot. All right, videos and stuff that's built inside there. What the newest piece that's there is streaming with YouTube. If you are a teacher, administrator, whatever person, and you're like, hey, staffing is probably not going to be 100% in August. Streaming might be something that you need to start to look into. Also, I got $1 million idea in my head, but I'm going to give it away for free. Why the devil can't we have teachers who are just off ratio teachers that just stream in the classrooms when teachers ain't there, and I teach your class. You just have the 18-year-old. At least in Vegas, you can be 18-year-old and sub now, right? All you need is a high school diploma. You put that person in there. There's no way you're telling me an 18-year-old kid has the the skill set necessary to positively instructionally create a pedagogically sound lesson. That person just sits in the room. Which the other thing I just thought about with that, how the devil could you have an 18-year-old substitute in high school?
What do you mean?
In terms of what kind of weird gray areas, and this is kind of totally off the top in terms of, hey, I'm Bob. I just graduated from X high school. Now I go back to substitute at X high school. Everybody knows me. My girlfriend happens to be a student at X high school. Like, that would be very
weird, very
interesting situation. But it is what it is. That's just very strange. But again, I don't think we'd have the expectation that a high quality instruction would be given by an 18-year-old kid who has no real life experience. But again, that's
I feel like we've deeply thought about this for about 30 seconds, and it's kind of worrisome that this passed several different whole panels of people to be approved, and that's
it seems that little bit cringy there, just a little bit cringy. Like, are they going to say, hey, you can't sub at a high school that you graduated from? Is that going to be a mitigation? But then again, what if you know people at other high school? Like, that's just to me.
There's no way
to mitigate that in a real way.
It's not great. Ethically, it seems not great. Anyway,
that being 15 what it is,
minutes over and totally off topic.
Indeed. So that's popping off. We're gonna next week we're kind of still stay with the visual arts theme and kind of play around with that. But other than that, teach your friends who happen to be in classrooms, like, keep hope alive. I did not realize how late spring break is for Clark County School District teachers. It's not until the middle of April. I was like, oh, sweet Jesus. So my CCSD homies, like,
hang in,
please. That's all we got. God bless America.
Cool.
My Ukrainian homies, thoughts, prayers. Hopefully, it saddens me that we, like humans, have not learned, but it is what it is. Prayers for the Ukraine, and we'll see you next week.